Welcome to Transit Roundup with Clevelanders for Public Transit, and with me is Terry Ross, also of CPT.
Hi, Dana.
CPT is a advocacy and organizing group working for safe, accessible, affordable, reliable, and environmentally sustainable and equitable public transportation.
First of all, we're going to have a brief iPhone video that was shot by a healthcare worker in New York City just yesterday morning on her commute from the Upper West Side of Manhattan down to Union Square, where she works at Beth Israel Hospital. Normally, streets are busy, subways packed, and you'll see in this video that it's just the opposite.
First, let's talk about an article from CityLab, How U.S. Public Transit Can Survive Coronavirus.
The two authors of this article describe themselves as urban research scholars specializing in public transit costs. They offer their ideas for what we should be doing now, over the next year, and in the long term. For right now, they say we should be hiring more cleaners, scan all passengers for temperature, be providing personal protective equipment for workers, and require all passengers to wear masks. They also say that agencies should be adjusting their routes to prioritize hospitals and grocery stores over office buildings and schools which are closed. Over the next year, agencies should be working on things like dedicated bus lanes and signal priority for buses at intersections. They also warn that short-term cuts made during a crisis should not become permanent because this will cripple agencies going forward and lead to lower ridership. Over the long term, we need to reorient development in cities around existing public transit systems. The authors of the article are Aaron Levy and Eric Goldwyn, both from New York University.
And Terry, I thought this was a very interesting article. You know, obviously we're talking about the federal funds that have been allocated to public transit around the US, $25 billion in emergency aid for operations, but that still doesn't solve all the problems, as we know. The way that transit has been funded for years really is problematic, and it's really going to make it difficult going forward, even with this extra emergency funding, for transit agencies across the country to recover after this pandemic. I thought it was interesting, this article talking about some of the things that Asian cities have been doing that US cities can also take as best practices. It says Taipei is cleaning equipment every 4 hours and trains every 2 hours. That's amazing. Here in Cleveland, we're cleaning things every 24 hours. So the second article we're going to be talking about is from the Huffington Post. It's titled Coronavirus Pandemic is Forcing Cities to Rethink Public Transportation.
Dana, this article looks at what cities in Italy are doing to reopen their economies without causing a second wave of COVID-19 infections, particularly what they can do to make public transit safer. To quote the article, under new guidelines that are being considered, the number of people allowed on buses and trains is likely to be restricted. Markers will be placed on the ground in metro stations to enforce social distancing, and camera systems and personnel will be deployed to help count passengers and prevent overcrowding. Moreover, a key goal of any plan will be to spread out daily commuters in order to reduce congestion. Cities like Milan have worked for years to reduce car use and they don't want to see that work become undone as they reopen their economies. So, Dana, can you tell us about this letter that was sent to Congress that CPT signed?
So on Earth Day, a letter was sent out from Transit Equity, a coalition of labor unions, transit organizations like CPT, civil rights and environmental justice organizers. We signed a letter that got sent out to the Speaker of the House and Majority Leader of the Senate, asking them to increase emergency relief funding for transit workers. Transit workers are frontline workers. They really do need to be protected as they're working to get people where they need to go.
So, Dana, I heard you on the radio last week. You were on 90.3 WCPN's Sound of Ideas along with India Birdsong to discuss actions that CPT has called for to protect riders and operators from COVID-19. CPT has called on RTA to shift to rear door boarding as recommended by the CDC and the Ohio Department of Health and the Amalgamated Transit Union and the American Public Transit Association, and to suspend fares until barriers have been installed. Can you tell us a little bit more about that discussion and what other transit agencies are doing?
So yeah, I was happy to go on and have this discussion with her. We are also joined by Nick Estelle of NPR. So yeah, the conversation was interesting. She had mentioned Cincinnati, actually, that has gone back to charging fares after suspending fare enforcement for a brief moment in time. There were concerns in that city with extra people riding buses. Their agency down there had not implemented any passenger limits, which is what some other agencies have been doing with success. Ms. Birdsong did mention a number of large cities were still charging fares, but Cleveland's a unique city, but we have similar bus systems to St. Louis, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Detroit, Milwaukee, and then also Cincinnati. And I had pointed out to her that actually all of these agencies are currently not enforcing fares except for Cincinnati, which we discussed. And each of these has also gone to rear door boarding.
I know that CPT member Rob Wynn did some fact checking on some of the things that India was saying during the interview, and he made this video in response.
We do encourage folks to be able to take transit as they always have. Again, we want to be able to get back to normal as far as we can. But I also want to point out that there are several agencies across the country. I believe that Dayton is still collecting fares. New York, LA, Chicago, San Francisco, Boston, Philadelphia, Dallas, Minneapolis, and St. Louis are some of the ones that I have on my list.
The MTA has implemented rear door boarding on buses and eliminated cash transactions.
Last weekend, we introduced the use of rear doors to maintain appropriate distances between operators and riders. Riders are now being directed to use rear doors to enter and exit buses and trolleys at street-level stops on the Green Line and Mattapan lines as well.
what else is on the agenda at RTA for this week that we should be aware of?
Well, RTA has their board meeting coming up for the month of May. That'll be on Tuesday, May 12th. We definitely encourage folks to make public comments.
Okay, so the public comments can be made by email, and the deadline is May 8th for those, right?
For right now, yes, that is what they're asking.
Well, we'll include a link below for where you can send public comments to the RTA for that important meeting. And just to let you know that public comments need to be 250 words or less, so don't write a big essay.
And we'll also link to the budget document itself so people can review that. RTA is asking that public comments are related to what's being discussed at the meeting.
How can people get involved with what we're working on with Clevelanders for Public Transit?
And you can help in a number of ways. Your time or your funds. You can check out our website. We do have a donate link, and that's always appreciated. Really, we would love to hear your transit stories and how this is affecting you, whether you're a essential worker. Share your experiences with us, and we can help enlighten others as to why transit is so important and why we need to fund this. And you can also submit your comments and your ideas for future video content.
Okay, so we're going to try and do this again next week and every week to help everybody stay informed about public transit in this time of the pandemic and going on long term. So thank you, Dana, for hosting this, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and leave your comments below, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.